And Audacity in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with my co-host, Marissa Roy. And in today's episode, we're going to be shooting the shit.
We're going to be workshopping, troubleshooting. We were basically like, so we for context, I feel like this is going to be like an OG listeners like catch-up episode where it feels like we're just talking to them more than like a preach to everyone type of episode. But like context is we kind of created a good rotation with our episodes that allows us to cover different topics, training, nutrition, mindset, and not go so heavy in one direction versus the other. And then we alternate the guest episodes within that. So if you haven't already picked up on that trend, you can look and see how that kind of pans out in the past, probably 20 episodes or something like that. And today was mindset. And we were like, what do you want to talk about? There's so much to talk about. And we picked out a couple like situations that we're working through right now that I think, would be good to just kind of go over just what stream of consciousness we have around it, because there was nothing like, there's no one thing that stuck out today, but a lot of really important, smaller things, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to talk about like when we have client issues, like we're not afraid to outsource or chat with other professionals and kind of be like, hey, how would you go about this? Or is there something that I'm not seeing? How would you tackle this? Because I think it's really important to know that, like, at least I would say good coaches is like, yes, we have our core pillars, right? Like we have our fundamentals, kind of what we believe in, but we're not afraid to branch out and try something new if that means that we can help a client. And that's not to say that we're outside of our scope, but it's just like, hey, is there, something that you would do differently? And I think that that's really, really valuable and can help a lot also too with like other clients. And it just is just another tool that you can have in your toolbox.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just like for us getting rid of the need to be right, and like fueling our ego of like, I figured this out, I got this client the best results or whatever. I think it's like ultimately the most pride can be found in just helping someone no matter what direction you have to go to do so, which is what I love about the last interview that we had. I don't know if it'll go right before this episode, but with Sam Miller, I loved that interview because it was just really about like ultimately, within scope, out of scope, that stuff is important, that we don't like really breach those lines, those hard lines, but there are soft lines in the sand as well. And it's like, ultimately we just need to be resourceful and figure out the answer. And there's been plenty of times where I've had no idea what the fuck to do with a client's like protocols or what they're going through. And I'm like, what is this? And I've just Googled it and figured it out because like ultimately as coaches, we're a resource, right? So we look at like the client as a whole. And then if we are presented with new information that we don't know anything about, we can factor that new information in based on the context that we have about their nutrition, their mindset, their sleep, their this, their that. And one thing that I loved about what Sam said was like, we just have the closest, like most sacred relationship with this person that we most likely will know what the best move for them is based on having all of that. So yeah, I mean, Christina, what specifically do you want to start with? What were you mentioning that your client was struggling with?
Yeah. So we had a couple clients who were struggling a little bit with the mindset of whether or not a program will work for them because they've done multiple programs in the past. And so it's kind of like, oh, this is just another program that's not going to work for me. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, it's not going to if you have that mindset. And so we talk a lot about reframing. And so it's like, this hasn't worked for me yet. But like, and it kind of implies like, but it's going to, or like maybe my progress is slower than I would like, but I am making progress. And so versus like, it's just not working, I'm never going to reach this goal, I'm always going to be fat. So using those like absolute terms. And it's, I think, was it Henry Ford who said, whether I'm going to butcher it, but it's like, if you believe you can or you can't, you're right. And I love that quote. It's so simple. And it's like, yes, so it's not going to work if you continue to have those thoughts, but then how do you change those thoughts? And I feel like this would be a great time to have Travis.
Oh, we can
back on.
go through it.
Yeah, and so it's like, well, how do you change those thoughts that clients have and really turn it around? Because if you don't have that buy-in, then it doesn't matter what strategies with nutrition or training, like it's not going to work.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two things. So number one is the limiting beliefs, and we'll break that down. But number two is the word that we just use there, whether or not it works, whether our program works, our methods work or not. And ultimately, I think that's just another example of utilizing all or nothing thinking and black and white language around it works or it doesn't. And in reality, everything works, but it just matters. It's just dependent on how much something works or not. And what are we even defining works as? Like, is works that you have it all, you don't have to think about anything and everything's just done magically for you? Or is works like you put in the work and the effort and you got closer to your goal? And so I like to think of it as, if we can reframe like this working as a series of more likelies. So are you more likely to get closer to the goal? If so, then that works. That constitutes as it working. And so reframing from does it work, does it not, based on what I did, or like, did I get closer to? Because we might be disappointed if we didn't lose 10 pounds in a week, based on, what we did to lose weight, but we did lose 2. Like, that's still progress. And so I think it's a matter of figuring out what we're defining works as. What expectations do we have around that? Is it like, I have unrealistic expectations and that's why I don't think it works? Or do I have unrealistic expectations about the work that I need to put in? And is that the reason that I'm disappointed? Usually disappointment and things not working comes from just incorrect expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of like what I feel like I should be doing versus like what I actually can be doing, factoring into like the time that I have available or like the current, if I like to use the example of like an accountant. If you're in the middle of busy season, it's probably not realistic for you to work out like 5 times a week. Like,
Yeah.
probably just not going to happen. So like changing up those expectations and making sure that they're aligned.
Yeah, well, that and like the what was I gonna say? The fact of it working is like your expectations around it, but also, oh man, just like the amount of what was the word I was gonna use? I lost it. Okay, well, we're just gonna go back to something else then. But I think it working or not working is ultimately just even using that language in the first place is setting us up for failure, because then we're trying to look at it from like a flip-flop lens versus like, how far along on this gradient did I get? And even with like, oh, I remember what I was going to say, like with people who are putting in work, but maybe they just don't know how much work they need to put in, right? They think it's like, I just do a couple of these things and it's like a magic pill solution, when in reality, there's a certain level. I'm thinking of one client in particular. There's this big discrepancy between what she believes that she's doing well and what she's actually doing well. And that's really hard, because it's a situation where like, I have to praise her for everything that she's been doing well, and the changes she's been making, they're not insignificant, but it's still just like not enough to get the results that she wants. And there's this lack of trust building in the program for her, because she's like, well, I don't think it's working. And I was like, but there is a cognitive dissonance here of like what you think you're doing and what you're actually doing. So I've been showing her with like some visuals, some color coding, some different ways, because for different people, it clicks different ways. But once you're able to actually see the difference between like what you think you're doing and what you're actually doing, then you can be like, oh, okay, so then how do I do that? The real thing, because she was basically saying to me yesterday that it feels like she is basically trying to eat more calories, but she's gaining more weight in the process. But I took a look at all the data, and all the data shows that this past week where she gained weight, she actually ate 200 calories less on average per day. But she just felt like she was eating more because she increased her protein intake. And so she was under eating by a decent amount, a pretty low calorie number compared to the goal that we had. And because she felt like she was so focused on getting protein in, which is super satiating, she was like, I'm eating more and I'm gaining more. And I was like, actually, it's like just data. It's not true at all. And so that's a really difficult one, because it's like, then there's this like belief brewing of like, this isn't working. And how do we break it? Part of it is like looking at, what is the truth? What is the data showing? Do we have enough data to actually make an informed decision? I think most people go based off of not really measuring anything and what they feel like is working or not working, and basing their judgments and their assumptions on that. So number one, you should definitely get a better handle on data to show if something is working or not working. And then second, it's the expectations.
Yeah. And I think another big thing too, it's like for some of those clients who don't have a ton of weight to lose, like they're starting at maybe like 140 pounds, maybe 130 pounds, their rate of weight loss is going to be significantly smaller than someone who's maybe starting at 200. Like they're going to see a bigger change on the scale, and they may not have to do as much to see very quick results. And so it can be very frustrating as someone who is like, I really don't have that much to lose. And then I have to work extremely hard to lose like a pound or two. And it's like, yeah, that's, because and you have to think about it kind of like from the flip side, is like someone who is 200 pounds would probably kill to be in your position right now. Yeah. But also just kind of recognizing, like I use like the toilet paper analogy. It's like, when you're like pulling a bunch of sheets off in the beginning, you're losing a bunch of weight, but like you don't really notice it. But once you get down to like the end of the ply, you're like, ooh, every sheet counts. And that's kind of, I feel like, how it is with weight loss. It's like every pound that you lose is like very, very significant, but you're going to kind of hit like a natural like plateau where you have to push to see more results. And this is actually, this is a great thing to talk about, but like, that's where I am right now. Like I hit like 130, but between like 130 and like 133 is just like my natural set point where my body just loves to hang out. And I've been like pretty good. Like I can intuitively eat, and like I can, work out here and there and do a little bit of cardio, and like I'll just maintain. And it's great. Like it's great. But like I also would like to be like a little bit leaner. And I have to be more diligent with tracking. I have to be doing cardio. Like I have to be on top of my workouts. And that does require a little bit of a sacrifice, but that's what I need to do. And I know myself, like I've gone through preps to know that like, I can't just guess like, and expect to see results. Like I do need to push a little bit further. And so sometimes it is very difficult to kind of talk to clients if they've never done that before. And they say, well, this person's losing weight and they're like not really doing a whole lot. And it's like, yes, sometimes that happens. Like sometimes people can get really shreddy, and that's like not fair. And then there are some people who like, we just hold on to a little bit more body fat, and like, yeah, we can sit there and say it's not fair, or we can do something about it.
Good points. I have a couple things out of that. Number one, like, you made me think of, okay, yeah, the client that I was just talking about that had the cognitive dissonance, she had already lost like 15 pounds. And like, this was her kind of stuck point of like, okay, what got you here won't get you there. And like, that's a really common thing, is like, you think that something that works up to a certain point will continue working, but it's like, no, now we kind of have to dial it in more. And so I had to talk with her about the what got you here won't get you there mindset. And like really reframing, like, okay, that worked. It did. It doesn't mean that like, it doesn't work, period. It means it worked up to this point. And now something different is going to work. And actually, I need to bring that up with another client of mine. Second point on that is, again, expectations played into that, right? If someone else is losing weight, not doing a lot, and we market them because we market those people, because we are, at the end of the day, we have to keep our lights on at home. And like that's a tricky game for me to play. I know probably you feel the same in marketing, where it's like, I will market this shit out of the highlight clients. Absolutely. Right. Because that's what brings in a lot of referrals and clients and attention. But also I do try to also acknowledge the smaller wins and the clients that don't have it quite as easy, because those also exist, and just being real with it. But a lot of times we just look at the highlight reel, we say, well, that person got away with this and that. They didn't track a single macro. They lost 15 pounds. And I have to track all my macros to a T, and I'm not seeing any weight loss. It's like, yeah, that sucks. But comparison will kill your joy and will kill your progress. So like, yeah, it's just knowing when to like honestly put your own coach on mute on Instagram. Like I support that for a lot of people. I'm just like, listen, you're in the program. You're going to see me every week on our office hours. Like, mute my stories if it bothers you, if it gets to you. Like, just don't look at my shit. Last thing, you mentioned set point, like 130 is your set point, and the what got you here won't get you there thing. I think it's just interesting to point out the use of that word, because a client of mine mentioned that. She was like, what's your thoughts on set point theory? And I was like, ooh, we haven't talked about this in a while. And I think she's a regular listener to this podcast, so I think she'll appreciate how this ties in. But my opinion, and I don't remember, we've probably talked to somebody on this podcast at some point about set point theory specifically.
We did.
And I can't remember what the actual like science behind it
Grant?
is. Maybe Grant. That would make sense.
That's what I'm thinking, but
oh, we should get James Krieger on for obesity. That would be a great topic, and insulin resistance. Anyways, I'll reach out to him. But set point theory, my thoughts on it, as much as like there may be a physiological factor, like you use the word so casually, but I do want to point out with set point theory, my stance on it is that the reason that that is your set point is it's because it's the comfortable lifestyle that you're accustomed to living. And if your lifestyle were different, for example, if you just had a lifestyle that was more centered around training all the time and like doing all these things, like then that would be a different set point. And so like myself personally, I'm kind of, I mean, the past like 10 episodes have just been like therapy sessions for me. And so I really feel like I've come out of it. So I'm not going to make it that again. But what I will say is that I think something I've noticed like Aaron doing is he's been training a lot. He has some big goals for himself, and it's been really inspiring and motivating for me to actually want to, like, as a couple, shift our lifestyle a little bit more in that like favor of like, no, I do train hard 5-6 days a week. And like, that is who we are and what we do. And that will probably result in a different set point for myself and for him, in terms of the food that we intake and the body weight that we sit at and the body composition that we hold. And I've kind of been toying with that idea lately, but I think it's important to note that like the non-negotiables that you live by will determine your set point. So if your set point is, if you say that it's like 250 pounds and you're 5'4", your lifestyle probably is fairly sedentary, and you probably eat out a lot or like don't have much of a handle on nutrition. Versus if you're 5'4" and your set point is like 150, and you'd like it to be 130, then maybe you just would have to accept the fact that like a little bit more daily activity or cardio or exercise needs to be a part of your life. And if that is something that fits into the picture, then that would be a great set point. And I think it's just learning like what manipulations you're okay with keeping in and can sustainably keep in.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like that. And I do think that your set point can change over time based on a lot of different factors. And it's like, how much muscle you have, like, and again, like so over time it could improve, but then you also have to factor in like, well, how many diets have you gone through? Like what, so there's just so many different things that we can go off on a huge tangent. But I think that the big thing is, like, what is just like your comfortable lifestyle that you can maintain? And it's pretty easy for you. And so like, that's where I am right now. And so I know this is my set point, because if I have to be more active, if I have to work out more, like that is going to require a lot more planning and discipline because of having a kid. Like I didn't ever really think about like getting steps in would be difficult for me, but it is like, I can't just set up my step pad because Colton could get on it and injure himself. So I can only do that when he
Mm.
is sleeping. And like, I can only go on so many walks right now because of the temperature. Like, so there's just so many different things that like, I wish my activity was a little bit higher, but it's something I really have to be dedicated to do every single day. So yeah, I do kind of have like a natural sticking point right now. And like, other things considered, it might be a lot higher and I might be able to maintain like a leaner physique based on other lifestyle factors. But that, yes, that's a whole tangent that we, but yeah, it's kind of like, I'm thinking about a client who like works again, like the CPA example, or like works multiple jobs, or like doesn't have time to do all this. It's like, again, it's like really managing those expectations and being like, okay, well, what is easier for you to do right now is going to just kind of, you're just going to kind of continue to stay in this spot unless some other things change. So that's what
Yeah.
we need to focus on. Like, cause we cannot continue to do the exact same thing and expect different results.
Yeah. And I think it's also like just worth having a conversation about like empowering a person too, because I actually had a really impactful, week in Montana. I was at a bachelorette weekend with some friends and new friends, actually. I only knew one person going in, which was the bride. But now I have like 6 new friends, which is pretty cool. One of them is a mom of a few kids. I can't remember exactly how many, 3, 4 maybe, but single mom of a few kids. And something that the bride shared about her, and they're really close friends, was that like it really opened her eyes to show like how much bandwidth someone has can be adaptable, and you can handle more probably than you think. So like she was saying, I don't have any kids, I run a business, I feel overwhelmed, I have all this stuff to do, and I feel like I need to expand my bandwidth. And then I look over at, I'll call her Sally because I don't want to expose her name, but I look over at Sally and she has like 3 kids and she's working full time and all this stuff. And she's like, oh, like all 3 kids are like screaming her name, mom, mom, mom. And she's just like, oh, here you go. I'll take care of this. I got this, blah, blah, blah. And just like doing what she needs to do, like just total calm. And like, she looked at her and she was like, oh, I could do more. Like, and so I think it's like recognizing the fact that just because you feel overwhelmed now doesn't mean that it is too much for you. And I've said this before, overwhelm is a limiting belief. This tends to trigger people because we are overwhelmed like by nature in our culture. But ultimately the feeling of overwhelm is the belief that this is too much for you. This is that you can't handle it essentially. And ultimately it's probably not true. You probably just need better systems in place to handle whatever stressors you're dealing with. And so if you can look at it that way, then you kind of get shifted into this solution-oriented mindset of like, okay, well then what systems do I need? How do I put those systems in place? And a lot of times that's where a coach can come in and help you design that. And I think that's where, if you're having this thought of like, I'm at my set point with my lifestyle, I don't feel like I can make more changes to my lifestyle right now to fit in more exercise, better diet, better choices, more sleep, whatever, then it's probably time to have the conversation with yourself of like, is that true? Or like, am I just kind of selling myself and my abilities short? Because I think what I found is that people are just so capable. We're so capable, and there wouldn't be all these amazing like anomalies and success stories in the world of these crazy, incredible people and stories and human beings if we didn't have more bandwidth to give. Like I look at like, we were talking about Nick Bear the other day, like the CEO of BPN.
Yeah.
Like he wakes up at like 5 a.m. every day. He has a kid, he has a wife that he tends to, he runs this whole company. Like, and obviously he doesn't do it alone.
He stepped down.
Yeah, well, he did for a while. And he like
Just saying.
vlogs on
Well, because
YouTube.
maybe something had to give, right? Maybe he had hit his
But it's
yeah.
like you look at that and I'm like, like I can do more. Like I look at that and I actually feel like inspired and motivated versus like down on myself. And I think, side note, those are the people you should follow on Instagram, on social media, the people that you look at that actually motivate you to do better, not from a place of self-hatred, but from a place of inspiration. But that was like for me a moment where I was like, I think more is possible, and not in like a destructive way, and not in like a I'm putting so much pressure on myself that's unrealistic type of way, but just like I need to figure out a better system, and I think it's possible type of way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So I think that I'm good with these particular clients that I have in mind. But I also love our little tangents that we throw in, about, just set points and random things. But, I know that you had brought up another client if you wanted to chat about them.
uh oh yeah. I'm sorry, I forgot. We're like 25 minutes in. Um actually, I will go a different direction because I've been seeing this a lot, and I really wanted to talk about it either in like a reel or a podcast or something recently, which is I'm basically doing like a copy paste of like one of the challenges that I ran through Instagram for PCC for my CrossFit gym. So I'm doing their like nutrition challenge. And I had this post scheduled to go up on like a Sunday, and it was like, check in. What did you do well? What did you struggle with? What's your goal this week? And everybody who commented, I was like looking through the comments and I was just like laughing to myself. I was like, oh my God, they're all doing the exact same thing, making the exact same mistake. And it was like, this week I did well with this. This next week, or like, I struggled with this. My goal is to fix it. Like, and I was just like, that's it. Like, just do better. That's your goal. Like, so you mentioned that, right? With someone
Yeah,
struggling with that.
exactly. Yeah, it
It's
was
like,
like, what happened on the weekend? Like I fell off with my macros. So what am I gonna do? Do better. Okay. What what does that look like? What are we gonna do? Like how we can't just have, and like we've talked about this a lot in like goal setting podcasts. Like we have to be specific and it has to be measurable. Otherwise, like what are we really changing and how do we know if we quote unquote did better?
yeah. So, oh, it's so funny, but I've like not to make fun of them. It's just like
No,
everyone
no, no,
does
no,
it,
no.
right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's just funny that it happened to literally every single person on that comment thread. And I was like answering the same way for every single person. I was like laughing to myself, like, we need to talk about this, right? So basically, the goal is not just like, okay, I'll use one example in particular. It was like, I drank every night this past week. She said, like, I had too many alcoholic beverages. I drank every night this past week. My goal is I'm not going to drink this week. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And so
Like you're literally setting yourself up for
for
success or
failure.
I'm sorry, for failure, not success, for failure. Yeah.
Yeah. I was
And
like,
it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's not like you have to give up alcohol, but like, let's move from 7 days to 5 days. And that's a huge improvement. But
yeah,
also that makes it measurable.
yeah. So yeah, that's basically where I was going with it, was like, you're setting yourself up for failure, and you would be a lot better off if you just tried to reduce the amount that you had by 20 to 25%, if that's your goal, right? So I use that just because it's like a modest decrease, and it typically, for most habits, doesn't feel like you're changing a lot. For example, if my steps this past week were 5,000, nope, you know what? I'm going to use 8,000 just for math's sake. If my steps this past week were 8,000 and I wanted to increase them by 20%, then it would be, or 25%, it would be 10,000, like a quarter. And like the difference between 8 and 10 isn't that much compared to like going from like 2 to 8 or 2 to 10. So I just do that math to show like it's not going to feel all that different, or especially if you're like really sedentary, like 4,000 steps per day, 2,000 steps per day, 25% of that is like go from 4 to 5, like easy. It barely feels any different. Maybe you go
It's
on.
a 10-minute walk.
Yeah. So it's just like, that allows you to actually, here's what it does. You basically build momentum, build positive reinforcement. You're able to say to yourself, wow, I followed through on a commitment that I made to myself. That feels good. So then you're more motivated to do it again. And then you're able to progress and progress and progress. And then from there, you can increase the goal further the next week by maybe another 20 to 25%. And then all of a sudden you'll be doing the thing that you want to be doing, or very close to it. in just a matter of a few weeks, but you won't have done the gigantic like up and down roller coaster to get there.
Yeah. And I think that is where a lot of people have a disconnect with like how they're going to find success. Because I know that both of you and I, we have very similar clients who have very similar headspaces. It's like, we talk about the program and we're like, hey, we're going to meet you where you're at. This isn't going to be a complete 180 of your life. Like, we're going to integrate this stuff into your life. And then they come into the program and they're like, this isn't hard enough. This is too easy. This is too basic. This program is, and it's hard because everything that they've done in the past has been extreme in order to get them results. But then it's like, okay, but then you lose the weight, you can't sustain it. And now you're in this cycle where you're gaining and losing, 10 to 20 pounds. Where if we work and we have this be a lifestyle, it's not going to seem as hard, but you're going to be able to maintain it because it's just like, oh, this is just my life now. Like, this is just like what I do, rather than like you're on a diet or you're not on a diet. And so I saw a reel the other day, which I absolutely loved. It was this, Fitspo or whatever. And she was talking about, I don't want to call her a Fitspo because I felt like she had a really good message. But she was like, I quit 75 hard on day 42. And she was like, and it wasn't because it was too hard that I couldn't keep up with the 2-day workouts, or I wasn't disciplined enough. And she was like, as the further I went into the program, she was like, I lost, I think she was like 10 or 15 pounds or something like that. She's like, I realized that I don't have an issue with discipline or willpower. And she's like, but I have a problem with finding balance and moderation. And 75 hard was just continuing to perpetuate the idea of like, I need to be doing something extreme all the time and having these set rules to follow. And she's like, because that is easier for me than trying to live a balanced, normal, healthy lifestyle. And I absolutely loved that. And I was like, wow, that is so powerful, because I feel like sometimes we have a lot of people who come into programs and they want it to feel hard. They want it to like, that's what they feel like they need in order to reach results. And so the big thing that we're trying to teach within our program is it doesn't have to be that way. It can just be like, quote unquote, easier. And it doesn't have to be this all or nothing mentality. And it's almost like sometimes, yeah, that is harder because you don't have these set of rules. And we talk about this a lot with prep, like why off season is so difficult. And like, because prep is just black and white. I can't do this. I have to do my cardio. I have to get this in, and it does not matter. But everything else is on the back burner, right? Like your career might suffer, your relationships might suffer. It's because you're putting health and fitness as like, this is the only thing that really matters at this time. And it is really difficult trying to juggle it all. Like having a life, having a career, having relationships, like having like, I can have a couple beers on the weekend and like, but rather than that all or nothing, I'm either binge drinking or not drinking at all. So I thought that was really powerful, because we have had a couple clients who come into the program. And they're like, this isn't hard enough.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that, and I will kind of push back on saying it can feel easier. I think in ways it's harder. And I think,
that's what I'm saying.
It's difficult to, have that moderation and that balance. And a phrase that I've been using a lot lately is that the concepts themselves, super simple, but they're not easy. Right. And so it's like, we're looking for this like complex, like, here's the 5 rules for 75 hard. Here's the specific this and that, or like, even worse, like, it's my hormones. I need all these tests and these supplements in order to, see results. And honestly, it's probably pretty straightforward and probably pretty simple. It's just not easy because we can't wrap our heads around the fact that it can be so simple. Like, do these, like, walk, eat good food, exercise, sleep, and don't be a stress ball. Like, like, it's so simple. And if we just actually executed on those things consistently, we'd look back and be like, oh, that was easy. And what we mean is it was simple. It was straightforward. I still had to exercise discipline and conscious thought and mindfulness through my decisions, but it can feel easier in comparison because we're not sacrificing everything or giving it all up. So I've been using that a lot. The phrase simple, but not easy, with a lot of things.
Yeah, I really like that, because it's easy to have someone else tell you what to do and to follow those rules. Like it's can be pretty easy for a lot of people where it's like, this is my meal plan. But then what happens when you don't have a meal plan or you want to go out, like, or you have friends, like, how do you manage those situations where you're kind of like in charge of your own stuff and your decisions like that? I feel like that can be where it is difficult. So yeah, it's a really, really good term. I love that. Simple,
I
but
have
not
a
easy.
Yeah, I have one more thing on that, with when it comes to where how you were saying we meet clients where they're at. And I think that's one piece of it. The second piece of it is they have to meet themselves where they're at. And this was the conversation that I was having earlier today that I was like, oh, I'll skip it, but like this part ties in. Um, she basically was saying, like, I feel like I'm experiencing grief over the person that I
Hmm.
lost, the person that was fit, the person that had her shit together, the person that was disciplined and organized. She's gone, and I'm dealing with grief around that. And I was like, damn, like, now that's real, because now it's like it's an emotion that like we equate to loss of like loss of a loved one, loss of this identity of ourself. And so she was really struggling to meet herself where she's at, because she was basically like, well, I should be able to just jump back into where I was, but I can't. So what's the point? And it was the all or nothing mentality presenting itself there. And so my thoughts on this are, and I'm curious yours too, like, I think there's a way to reframe it of like, she's not gone, but maybe you just forgot how to get in touch with her. Um, so maybe rephrasing it that way. But this was a difficult one to break down. So, and like really work through with her. We eventually did, but I'm curious, like, what your, bless you, what your approach with that would be, if someone's dealing with grief over their past self.
Yeah. So this is a conversation, and I know we've had this a lot, going from single or in a relationship to having kids. It's really difficult because you feel like, the things that you used to be able to do, you can't do anymore. And so that can be really, really, really difficult. It's like, well, if I can't go to the gym for an hour and a half every single day, then what's the point? And like, if you continue to live in that mindset, like, you're never going to get anywhere and you're just going to be a victim of your circumstance. So trying to reframe and be like, okay, but what can I do? Like, what is still in my control? And so maybe almost trying to like reframe a different identity, but then maybe be like, okay, yeah, maybe that person was super dedicated and super fit and had their life together and was organized, but like, was there other areas of their life that they neglected? Like, what about you now? Do you like almost wish you could give to that person? Like, okay, but yeah, but now we have found other hobbies, or like now we are more caring and compassionate, or yeah, I don't know, whatever you might be. Like, how do we almost like merge those two identities together? So rather
Yeah.
than like mourning, it's like, well, how can we have these two identities almost like find themselves?
Yeah. Yeah. Or just create a new one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Cause
create the
it's
new
like,
version.
right. Like what are the characteristics that you liked of your, this old self that you're mourning, and how can we still kind of create those?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's the, oh, I lost my train of thought. Oh, well. Um, but yeah, I think just the grief thing, it was very interesting, but like, I think just rephrasing that as, how can I step into this new version of myself? Oh, that's what it was. It was, there's that viral reel going around that's like, you're living a dream that you never thought you could attain 5 years ago or something right now. It's like, recognize like how far you've come, essentially, is the message there. So I think it's like comparing it to that, right? So like what you said about being able to let go of the grief from quote unquote losing that person by appreciating where you are. Um, and I think the advice that I gave the woman today was, give yourself compassion for where you are today, right? You have to really accept where you are now in order to move forward. Like nothing really great comes from comparison to your past self. It's the same as comparison to other people that are ahead of you, or people that motivate you, or people that make you feel bad about yourself. Like it's the same. All comparison is not going to move you forward. So you have to really just find that acceptance for where you are right now in order to move forward. And sometimes that means like meeting yourself where you're at today comes with a lot of practicing. How can I appreciate where I am and not continue to just take away from that with a bunch of shoulds and I need to, and I should do this and I have to do that. It's like, no, you are where you are right now. There is nothing you can do to change that everything that led up to that, but you can change that now today with your present actions. And I think it's like, you're basically living in the past by focusing on the person that you've lost. And since no one actually passed away, you don't have to feel that grief. You can just focus on creating the version of yourself that you want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. One last scenario that I think is important to touch on. Just another, I was talking with, we had a coaches meeting today and we were talking about clients and issues. And, we were talking about certain clients that are successful and those that struggle a little bit more within the program. And one of the things that we kept circling back to is mindset and stress perception, and how you can have a client do the exact same thing, but how they process has a really big impact on just everything. So it can be something as simple as like the client in particular, who was successful, ate a donut. She's like, I walked into the break room. There were these like super decadent donuts and I didn't think twice. I just had one because I wanted it. And then I just knew that I would have to change my dinner a little bit and to have something not as decadent. That was it. And she was like, and it was awesome. And like that was it. She moved on. And I don't know if that was just like a win from the week or just like being like, I can fit donuts into my week and that's awesome. And I don't have to feel guilty over them. And that's it. And it's great. And I don't feel like I'm restricting myself versus someone else who has a donut and they feel guilty. Oh my God, I shouldn't be eating donuts. Like I'm spending all this money on a program and oh my God, now I have to change up my whole day with what I was eating. Oh man, maybe I just need to go and run it off and do some cardio, or God, I just, you don't have any willpower and just shitting on themselves like the whole day for doing something versus just being like, hey, I enjoyed it. It was awesome. Maybe I have to make a little bit of a sacrifice later, but that's it. And I move on and like something like that. And then it can spiral to be like, oh my God, I already ruined my day. So I might as well just whatever for dinner. Like I might as well just eat the pantry, or, well, Monday sucks. So doesn't matter if Tuesday's any better. And it's like just something so simple can just cause like a huge spiral. And so I don't know if I kind of feel like that is a little bit of that like all or nothing tendency where it's like one thing can just make or break, or if it's just, I don't know if it's stress perception or just kind of like, cause I'm sure that there was the milkshake study. I think we've talked about this before on the podcast.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you can literally give to groups of people the exact same like caloric milkshake, or drink or whatever, label it something healthy versus labeling it something decadent, and like how you are perceiving what you're drinking or eating can actually change how your body processes the food, which is insane to me.
Yeah.
Literally insane that your mind has such a big factor into like how your body processes things. And we've talked about this before, but Mind Pump, they were talking about something similar where they had vegans eat meat and like they tracked how their body processed it. And then they gave vegans meat and then told them they ate meat. And just like the shit show, it's like probably not a very ethical study. I actually don't know how they were able to do that.
That's awesome.
But then like I think they were saying just like the insulin resistance like went down, or like I'm please don't quote me on this study because I don't remember the exact, but it was like their bodily response was just huge based on what they were thinking. Yeah. So like it's just wild. It's wild how important it is for mindset. And that's why these topics for us are so important, because it's like, you can have the quote unquote perfect nutrition plan. You can have the quote unquote perfect fitness plan or program or whatever, but it does not matter. Like if your mindset is not there.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind for me is something that we were going to go over anyways, which was the belief behind the action. So I'll use a donut example. The person that ate the donut and was like, this is great. I love donuts and I'm going to be fine. The question you have to ask yourself is, what are they feeling? So they're feeling happiness, contentment, not really any stress. So like the question from that is, what would they need to believe in order to feel that way? And maybe they believe that they are in control of their outcomes. Maybe they believe that they are capable. Maybe they believe that sweets are no longer bad for them in moderation. Maybe they believe that they are not prone to failure. All these different things. You can dig and dig and dig and find what the root belief is, but essentially that's why they perpetuate positive actions. But the person who eats the donut and freaks out and then eats a million donuts after because they are self-sabotaging, and their stress response is really high, and then maybe their insulin resistance goes up and all this stuff happens as a result. And maybe they struggle to lose weight more for a lot of reasons. The question you have to ask them is, okay, they ate the donut, they're stressed. Why are they stressed? What would they have to believe in order to feel that way? And they would need to feel like they messed up, like they're a failure, like they're not capable of reaching their goals, like all of their success hinges on one tiny action versus the sum of many actions. All these untrue beliefs. And then Travis's belief cycle. So if you go back to episode 126, then you can check out this cycle in action a few times in other examples. But the question you ask yourself from there is like, are those things true? Like, does your progress actually hinge on this one action? Are you prone to failure? Are you incapable of seeing long-term results? And the thing about this question is that your gut instinct, if you're doing this right and you get to the right root belief that you're not worthy, you're not capable, you're incompetent, you will never be happy. If those are your root beliefs, your gut instinct to answer that question should be, well, I don't know, maybe it's true. Or like, I think so, or yes, or something that's like wishy-washy because you haven't broken it yet. And so you don't have to actually believe the thing to be untrue yet. But what you do have to do is, in that moment when you identify that root belief, you have to say, no, it's not. Because that is going to perpetuate a different cycle of actions and a different cascade of events that will reinforce that belief and allow you to move forward with more momentum. That is how we shift behaviors and essentially change lives in the course of one conversation. So what would I have had to believe in order to feel that way? And then, is that belief true? Are the questions you need to ask. And then the answer to that, is that true? If you're doing it right, you're probably going to feel like, well, maybe it's true, but you have to say no. You just have to say no, because the cascade of feelings and empowerment that you're going to get from saying no to that is, oh my God, maybe it's not true. Maybe I can do this. Let me put the other donuts down and go do something else, because maybe it's not true. And you give yourself that little beacon of hope, and then you build on it and you build on it and you build on it. You just have to do it over and over again. That's like literally how you change your subconscious programming.
Yeah. I feel like that's like a mic drop.
I love that whole cycle is so great. And the more times I explain it, the better I understand it. And so it's actually helping me too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was perfect timing because Colton is awake and
Perfect.
crying. Yeah.
Yay.
But guys, we hope that you enjoyed this episode and really got something out of it. And as always, feel free to reach out to either one of us if you do have questions, comments, thoughts, anything like that you want to go over, we're happy to help. But if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. You can find both of us on Instagram. You can find me at Christina Fit, and Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope to see you back next week.